But effectively, what renting a piece of land enables them to do is quite literally put up fences and charge people to come in. And once you can charge people a penny here, threepence here, it means that you've got security. It means that you can issue posters and say, we are going to be playing on that particular day against that particular team.
Like Villa, clubs from the North and Midlands were growing stronger and began to mount a serious challenge for the FA Cup. Since 1871, it had remained the exclusive property of England's southern amateur sides. But in 1883, all that changed.
If anyone in sort of summarises and captures the moment of transfer of footballing power, the locus of footballing interests, it's the cup final where the team from Blackburn beats the Old Etonians. For 10 years, the public school teams had won the FA Cup, and eventually, in the early 80s, along comes a team from Blackburn that consists of working men and skilled working men, and who beat the Old Etonians, wresting the cup from its founders, the old public school boys, and taking it back up north.
This defeat may have marked the end of public school domination on the field, but off it, there was still a major battle to be fought. The Football Association was run by an upper-class elite whose amateur traditions were squarely at odds with the professional game that was slowly creeping in.
I think as soon as cup competitions began to develop in the 1870s, and as soon as crowds began to grow in numbers in the 1870s, it became inevitable that clubs wanted to become the top clubs and began to pay players. It became more and more of an issue as clubs went further afield looking for players, particularly in Lancashire, as the Lancashire clubs began to go looking to Scotland as a source of supply.
Preston North End were just one of the many clubs prepared to ignore the Football Association's strict amateur rules.
The Scottish influence at Preston was extremely strong, and throughout the club's history, really, this has been a Scottish club playing in the English League. By 1886, an average Preston side would have up to 8 or 9 Scotsmen playing in it. All sorts of means were used to disguise the fact that these are technically illegal professional footballers. One of Preston's main tools was to give people public houses. And when one of the signings from Bolton, having been given a public house, then married a local woman, Bolton supporters pointed out that Preston not only give a pub to people to play for them, but give them a wife as well.
Seduced by letters begging their services, a steady flow of players was swept down the coastline and deposited on English shores.
Kilmarnock had a player called Bummer Campbell, who was a very good player, and word got out in Kilmarnock that an agent was arriving from Nottingham Forest to try and sign Bummer, and the deputation went down to the station, met the agent, rearranged him a bit and put him in the next train south. But very often, of course, the raids were successful and people went down south to play, and they were advertised for in sports papers, and they were almost invariably referred to as the Scotch professor.
The Football Association failed to stem the growing tide in professionalism and in 1885 sanctioned it. This was to prove a vital turning point in football's evolution.
It's clear by the mid-80s that there's so many people keen to play it, and even more people willing to watch it and pay to watch it, that what the game needs is a regular cycle of play in the winter months from, September through to March, April. The Americans have perfected a similar system through baseball, I think, through a kind of a league system. And that provides the kind of template, the blueprint, for what is introduced in England in the late 1880s. And that is a league system that enables football to be played throughout the winter months, to allow the fans to go on a regular basis and still incorporate that element of competition, the win, the losing, and coming top, the champions.
William McGregor, an Aston Villa committee member, initiated a meeting to discuss such a league in September 1888. Based around 12 teams from the Midlands and the North, the first matches were not entirely successful. Accrington arrived an hour late for their game with Everton, while Stoke turned up at Preston with 9 players. One missed the train, while another signed for an opposition club. Preston North End became the first league champions in the world, taking the title without losing a single game. The league boosted football's appeal immeasurably, so much so that for many it became the focal point of their existence. And in the following years, stadiums rose up like spires to become the ever-present, tangible reminder of a shared yet tribal passion.
In many ways, your attachment to the ground is far stronger than your attachment to the team and the players, because the players come and go. We know they're mercenaries, whatever people would say. We know that they're playing because they have to earn a wage, and if someone offers them a better wage, they'll go up the road and they'll go somewhere else. But the fans stay there, they stay with the team, and the ground is the constant. It's the church, it's the spiritual home, that rectangle of turf to which we all pay homage on a regular basis.
Having conquered the hearts and minds of the British, football's diaspora began in earnest.
Football grows phenomenally, not just in Britain before 1914, but it mushrooms throughout Western Europe and in South America and other places too. There's no doubt that the men who are committed to the game are committed to playing it wherever they go. And of course they go all over the world. British businessmen, British soldiers, British sailors, British governors, British in some kind of imperial capacity, and also just ordinary working men. There's tens of thousands of working men who travel, and in a curious kind of way they also become missionaries for the game. They hadn't been at home, but once they're abroad, what they want to do, of course, is to cling to the games, the culture that they'd left behind at home. And the most important kind of secular culture that they're attached to was football. It's a game that the British deeply influenced at all kinds of levels by 1900, but particularly by 1914.
This mass exodus of skilled British labour into the new industrial heartlands established the game throughout Europe. Most countries absorbed football willingly, gratefully. Yet in Germany, a nation with global ambitions of its own, the game was regarded with suspicion.
In den Anfangszeiten des Fußballs war die ganz überwiegende Meinung über Fußball in Deutschland eine negative. Fußball galt als ein englischer Import und England war auch unter politischen Gesichtspunkten ein Gegner Deutschlands. Und man mochte diesen Fußball einfach nicht. Fußball galt auch als unsittlich, weil Leute diesen Sport in kurzen Hosen betrieben und also Körper zeigten, wenn es auch nur Beine waren. Und alles das waren Sachen, die gefielen den Durchschnittsdeutschen einfach nicht. Und hinzu kam, dass der betriebene Sport in Deutschland eben ein ganz anderer war. Das war nämlich Turnen. Und Turnen war eben auch was sehr Nationales.
In the years preceding the First World War, the gymnastic tradition became more than just a drive towards physical perfection. It became part of the Kaiser's nationalist philosophy. After the war, the Kaiser was replaced by a democratic government, and football, not gymnastics, emerged triumphant.
Richtig populär wird Fußball, denke ich, erst in der Weimarer Republik, weil da auch die Voraussetzungen